One of my favorite things to talk about is indie horror. And Five Nights at Freddy's is most likely the one that started the trend of indie horror. But in 2017, Five Nights at Freddy's popularity would start to decline. And in that period, other indie horror games began to become popular. Games like Hello Neighbor, Tattletale, Granny. What even was Granny? In February of 2017, a small indie horror game would be released on Game Jolt as a demo, and would become a huge hit on YouTube, that game being Bendy and the Ink Machine. Now, Bendy got popular because of a cartoony 1930s art style that a lot of people enjoyed and was kind of rare for horror games to do at the time, but also giving off just a general eerie vibe that a lot of people enjoyed. But it's been 7 years since Bendy and the Ink Machine got its first release, and I kind of wanted to look back on the game. Was it as good as I remember? I don't know how to transition this into talking about Chapter 1, so look at this funny cat. I really like this picture of this cat. I think it's really funny. Game starts off with a letter from Joey Drew, our former business partner. In the game, we play as Henry Stein, a former animator that left pretty early on in the company. Joey invites us back after leaving so long ago, but Joey's nowhere to be found, and nobody is. The place is completely abandoned. After walking through the long corridor, Henry will eventually find a big room, almost like a warehouse. Then you have to find 2 battery cells to plug into the machine to rise it back up. Once you do, you are greeted with a giant mass of mechanical pipes and wires. This is the Ink Machine. Our next objective is to turn on the Ink Machine. Then you go to a room with a bunch of pedestals on it where you have to collect 6 items to turn on the Ink Machine. First item, the wrench, is wedged inside of Boris's ribcage. Next, in the employee lounge, you can find Joey Drew's book. You can find a record in a small room that was previously lit up like someone was in there. There's also an Easter egg in this room that if you play the radio, then it plays a song by Kyle Allen Music, a fan song that was added to the game. Inside of the theater room, you can find a Bendy plushie. In the animation room, right next to Henry's old desk, you can find a ink bottle. And where the ink machine is, there is a gear. Once we place all the items on the pedestals, we now have to turn on the main switch to the ink machine, which is located in the theater, the same place that we got the Bendy plushie. On the way there is an audio log from Wally Franks, the janitor of the studio. Now, I'm not going to explain every audio log word for word because that'd be really boring, so I'm just going to give you the TLDR on them. In the audio log, Wally talks about how Joey has been acting strange since they put in the ink machine, having everybody donate a personal item, which were the items that we collected before. He also talks about how annoying it is to clean up all the ink that the ink machine leaves behind because the pipes keep bursting. Once you turn the valve in the theater room, the ink will start flowing again, causing the room to flood because of a burst pipe. Now you can head back to the pedestal room where you can flip a switch that turns the ink machine on. This causes all the lights in the building to go off. So Henry has to walk back to the ink machine room. But when he gets there, it's all boarded up, like somebody didn't want him to get in there. And when Henry gets too close, a ink version of Bendy will reach his hand out trying to grab you. The entire studio begins to fill with ink, and right before Henry reaches the exit, the floor below him collapses. Henry wakes in a room full of ink, which he drains and finds a audio login by Thomas Connor. Thomas complains about how the pipes continue to break and that the ink is all the way up to his knees. Eventually, you will find a desk with an axe on it, which you use to cut down some boards to get into a hallway that you need to go to. The final room that you go into is a room with a bunch of coffins and a pentagram on the floor. When Henry walks over the pentagram, he begins to have visions of the ink machine, a wheelchair, and Bendy chasing him. And Henry passes out, and there's a fade to black. I like Chapter 1, but I have a problem with it. After you play it once, it's really not scary anymore, so it just turns into a walking simulator. But it builds up tension well, and the mystery of where are your coworkers, why is there a monstrous version of Bendy, why is there a wheelchair, makes the player really interested and want to keep playing. And it looks so much better from the early beta of the game. I mean, just look at this early version of the Ink Demon. So I'm going to give this chapter 5 funny cats with big eyes out of 10. Chapter 2 starts off with you waking where Chapter 1 ended. Moving into the next room, you will find a audio log from Sammy Lawrence, the music director of the studio. In this voice recording, Sammy mainly talks to himself, mainly being schizophrenic ramblings from him, but at the end he says that he requires a sacrifice. Heading down a hallway full of ink, we watch a man with a Bendy cutout walk by who ignores Henry. Once Henry gets to the other side, it's just a wall with a Bendy cutout standing there. Henry has to get 3 switches to unlock the door to the music department. Once inside, there is an audio log from Sammy Lawrence again. Sammy talks about how since the ink machine has been installed, there's been issues with it leaking. Joey's solution to this is to install a ink pump in Sammy's office, which annoys him because people are in and out all day. Heading into the stairwell, Henry finds out that it is completely flooded. You can then pull a switch which will turn the power on and will make a pipe leak. From that puddle, a man rises. These are searchers, people not turned into cartoon characters, but not turned into lost ones either, kind of in the middle. After you defeat the searchers, a pool room will open up right next to you. It really doesn't add much, but it's still pretty cool. Down the hall and by Sammy's office, there's an audio log by Wally Franks. Wally talks about how he keeps losing his keys to the storage closet when he takes out the trash. Looking in the trash cans, you can find the keys. Opening up the storage closet, there is an audio log from Sammy. Sammy talks about how you have to play a multitude of instruments to get inside of his sanctuary. First thing that you have to do is go into the projection room and turn on the projector. In there is also an audio log from Norman Polk, the projectionist. Norman talks about how Sammy will come into the projectionist booth, turn on the projector, and then run back down into his sanctuary, and how he won't come out for hours. Then you head down into the recording studio and play the instruments in a certain order and it should open for you. In the recording studio, there is also a audio log from Susie Campbell. She talks about how she's a voice actor for a new character called Alice Angel. Once in Sammy's sanctuary, we can pull a switch that will allow us to go into the infirmary. In the infirmary, there's a bunch of switches that will help stop the flooding in Sammy's office. However, the valve that you need isn't there, so you have to go deeper into the infirmary. Heading down there, we see a searcher with a hat that's holding the valve that we need that will disappear almost immediately. In a small office off to right, there is an audio log from Jack Fain, the lyricist of the music department. Jack talks about how it's too loud up in the music department, so he moved down here into this small little sewer area. At the end of the room, there is a searcher with the hat on that you have to drop a crate on to get the valve. You can now go to Sammy's office and drain the stairwell. Also in Sammy's office, there is a radio that plays Build Our Machine by DA Games, possibly the most famous Bendy fan song. Heading back to the stairwell, we get hit in the head by an axe by that mysterious person that was walking in the hallway earlier. You wake up tied up in a different room with the man right in front of you. This is Sammy Lawrence, and he plans on sacrificing you to the ink demon who he worships as a god. Sammy begins calling the ink demon, but instead of getting you, it gets him, and Sammy is presumed dead. Henry then frees himself from his restraints and begins heading down the hallway that opened when the ink demon was out. Getting to the end of the hallway starts a chase with the ink demon. After being chased down multiple corridors, a door will shut and you will be stuck in a room with a bunch of Bendy plushies. Walking into the next room, a can rolls on the ground and Boris the wolf walks out. And that's the end of the chapter. I really like chapter 2. It's probably my favorite chapter out of the entire game. I like Sammy a lot, he works well for the game, a cult leader makes sense for this universe. I also thought the puzzle in this chapter was pretty creative and I enjoyed it. However, I think the combat in the chapter is incredibly clunky and not enjoyable, so I'm gonna give this chapter 9 out of 10 of those funny looking cats. Chapter 3 starts off with you waking up in Boris's safe house. To leave the safe house, we have to find 3 bacon soup cans and make Boris some soup. After making it through a couple of rooms with the lights off with Boris, you will make it to a door that is locked, where Boris will head into the vents for you to unlock it. You can now enter Heavenly Toys, where they made all the Bendy merchandise. In the room ahead, there is a bunch of conveyor belts that you have to pick toys out of to move a bunch of shelves, and there is also an audio log from a Sean Flynn, who happens to be voiced by Jacksepticeye. The main takeaway from Sean Flynn's audio log is that the Alice plushies have not been selling as well compared to the Bendy and Boris plushies. Heading into the next room, the lights will turn off and Alice Angel will begin singing on the TVs. After a while, you will get jump scared by Alice Angel. The next room has a two-way sign saying demon or angel. You can choose either path. It doesn't affect the gameplay, it just depends on what audio log you get. Down the demon path, there is an audio log from Joey Drew. Joey gives a pretty generic inspirational speech, but at the end he talks about a way to cheat death. On the angel path, you get a audio log from Susie Campbell. She talks about how she was fired and replaced with another voice actor named Allison. After heading through either of the two rooms, we meet back up with Boris, where he gives us a weapon. To open the door to the next room, we have to have Boris stay at one lever while we push the other lever. There is also an audio log from Wally Franks and Thomas Connor in here. The audio log is them both struggling to stabilize ink machine pressure. Also, down that hallway, there's a secret hiding spot that was used in one of the early trailers for Chapter 3. Right before you get to the lever, you get jump scared by the Piper, who is part of the Butcher Gang. The Butcher Gang were like antagonists to Bendy during the Bendy cartoons. After pulling the lever, you could then head into the next room with Boris, where you find an elevator that you could take it up to level 9. In this new room, there's also an audio log from Thomas Connor. Thomas talks about how Joey cut a lot of corners while making the elevators, making them very dangerous to use, and how he prefers to take the stairs over the elevator. Which, yes, you can take the elevator, but there is also a stairs option, and the stairs also have secrets, so I thought I'd talk about the stairs now because most of the game will be elevator related. In the stairway, there's a radio that plays Random Encounters Bendy the Musical, which Bendy is voiced by Matt Pat in it. Just like a side tangent, like while recording this, Matt Pat has like 9 days until he retires, and I'm still really upset about it. And if I'm bringing this up and making you upset about it, because I know this won't be released before he retires, I'm sorry. At the end of the chapter, you can go to the projectionist area and turn a valve, which will open up a place in the stairway that has a audio log from Henry. In this audio log, Henry talks about how he's already having problems 2 weeks in with the company. Henry complains about Joey and also talks about how much time he's been spending at the studio and wishing to spend it with his probably wife, Linda. Moving on from the stairwell, we head into a room full of ink and a bunch of dead Borises. In this room, there is also an audio log from Susie Campbell. In this audio log, Susie talks about how Joey was incredibly kind to her, even calling her Alice, and that she liked it a lot. In the next room, we speak with Alice Angel, who reveals a lot about herself and how the world works here, saying that the first time that she was put in the machine, she was a monster, a nothingless creature, most likely a searcher. And now she wants to look as beautiful as possible, but she'll need your help, even promising Henry escape as long as you help her.
Whatever you want, mama.
First errand that we have to complete is collecting gears on level K. Just as a small interjection, because of the chapter being so long, they couldn't just do Bendy chases, so now Bendy will show up randomly if you stay out in the open too long. Because of this, the game adds in porta potties that you can now hide in to hide away from Bendy or any other enemy that's chasing you. After collecting the gears, Alice wants us to now collect ink from swollen searchers on level 11. Also on level 11, we are introduced to Fisher, another member of the Butcher Gang. Also on this level, there's an audio log from Wally Franks. Wally comments on a lot of people around the studio looking pretty sad and doesn't understand it because their job is to literally make people laugh through cartoons. Right next to Wally's audio log, there is a glass window with a man with a projector on his head walking by. After collecting the ink, you need to collect 3 valve cores from level P. Once on level P, you are greeted with another Butcher Gang member, being Stryker. The minigame that you have to play to get the valve cores is just leveling the ink canisters so that they're at the same level so you can collect the core. The only problem with this is that you're standing out in the open, which means the ink demon is more likely to get you. After dropping off the cores, the next errand that we have to run is destroying Bendy cutouts. Also on level 9, there's a room covered in boards that you can chop down now that you have an axe. Inside of this room, there is an audio log from Grant Cohen, the chief financial officer at Joey Drew Studios. Grant talks about how the studio is going through some financial problems, and Joey isn't helping by getting a bunch of ideas that keep dipping into the little money that they have left. These projects most likely being the ink machine. Alice explains that destroying all the Bendy cutouts makes the ink demon really angry, and once you destroy them all, the ink demon will spawn and will chase you if you don't hide. After returning the axe, you have to fight some enemies because they've entered level 9 and Alice is in danger. After defeating all the enemies, Alice will tell you to head to the lift and go down to level 14 so that you can meet an old friend. Once in level 14, we have to collect a bunch of ink hearts from dead Butcher Gang members to give to Alice. Here we also see the projectionist, a man covered in ink that has a projector on his head that we first saw on level 11. Now, collecting these hearts can be incredibly easy or incredibly hard, depending on how you played the game. If you do some secret stuff, then you can unlock the Tommy gun, which kills the projectionist pretty easily, but you can also kill him with an axe or a pipe, but it's extremely hard. Also on level 14, there's an audio log from Norman Polk. In the audio log, Norman talks about how he knows the ins and outs of the studio and knows how to not be bothered during the workday. Returning and giving Alice the hearts, she tells us to join Boris on the lift, and she'll take us to the exit. But before reaching the exit, Alice sends us speeding down the elevator, revealing that she used us and wants to use Boris for her experiments. Waking up after the elevator crash, we see Boris desperately try and wake us before being dragged away by Alice. That's the end of Chapter 3, and I like where the story's going for Bendy, but the gameplay could improve a lot. I think all the stuff that the chapter introduces, like the projectionist, Alice, Bendy free roam, the Butcher Gang, are all good improvements. However, gameplay-wise, it is incredibly repetitive. Doing the same errands, doing basically the same thing of turning a lever or doing a small minigame, becomes incredibly boring and it's not very fun to play. Not only that, but every problem that I had with the combat in Chapter 2 is only intensified with this chapter because there is more combat. So I'm going to give this chapter 4 Tully Tully Cats out of 10. So let's not waste any more time and let's just hop into Chapter 4. Chapter 4 starts off with Henry waking up at the elevator crash. Heading down the hallway, we realize that we landed in Level S, the accounting wing, and that we need to collect a valve handle in one of the rooms to go to the archives. In Grant Cohen's office, there's an audio log and the valve handle. In the audio log, the audio is completely unlegible. It sounds like somebody either transforming or maybe being attacked by some kind of ink creature. Entering the archives, we see a group of people covered in ink worshipping a Bendy statue. The next room is a library of some sorts with a audio log from Susie Campbell. In this audio log, Susie is clearly upset about being fired from Alice's role, saying that she doesn't like people going behind closed doors and not telling her things. In this library, we have to push 5 books so that we can enter a secret passageway. The next room is a deep cave that we have to use a ski lift to get across to the other side. To get it working again, we have to use a mini ink machine thing to make a gear that will connect with the ski lift to make it work. Also, in this mini ink machine, you can make a radio, which will play the fan song Can't Be Erased by JT Music. After taking the lift, you will reach a long hallway that halfway through walking, a bunch of inky hands will reach out for you. After heading through the stairs and into a lounge room, we see a man crying, saying that he wants to go home. The room right below him has a bunch of lost ones. People who had a soul that weren't turned into a cartoon character by the ink machine. They don't attack you and you can just move on to the vent. Soon after entering the vent, we get jump scared by the ink demon. After leaving the vents, we have to head up some stairs so that we can pull a lever to enter the warehouse. However, there is an audio log from Bertram Piedmont, the main architect behind Bendyland. Joey had this idea to make a theme park based around Bendy, a lot like Disneyland, and bring on Bertram to help make it. In the audio log, Bertram talks about at some kind of business meeting, Joey introduced him as Bertie, which greatly offended Bertram. He ends the audio log off saying that Joey might own the park, but he built it. We can then enter the Bendyland storage rooms, where they made and built most of the rides or games that would have been at Bendyland. In the back of the warehouse, we learn that we need to get the power on to the haunted house ride so that we can go and save Boris. Also, by the Carnival Games, there is an audio log from Wally Franks. In this audio log, Wally talks about how every time he heads down to the storage room, the people working there are always playing games, so he decided to hook up that whenever you win a game, it would open up a door. Heading into the next room, we see the Butcher Gang huddled around a fire. You have to use empty bacon soup cans as distractions so you can get by to pull one of the switches. In the room with the switch, there is also an audio log from a Lacey Benton, an engineer that worked on Bendyland. She talks about this animatronic Bendy that she's been building for Bendyland has been giving her the creeps lately. The second room that we go in has a massive carousel in it, and right next to it there's an audio log from Bertram Piedmont. In the audio log, Bertram sounds incredibly upset, blaming Joey on the horrors the studio created and that Bendyland was his masterpiece. During the speech, the giant carousel will smash the desk in front of you, revealing an axe. And with the axe, we have to cut off the safety braces on the arms of the carousel. After killing Killing Bertram, you can then pull a switch to head to the third room. The third room is covered in ink and the projectionist is lurking around. Here, there's also an audio log from Joey Drew. In the audio log, Joey is giving one of his inspirational speeches when halfway through he cuts himself off, saying that people eat up this inspirational garbage and gets upset when he realizes that he's still recording. After pulling a switch on the second level, the lights will go out and the projectionist will stop chasing you. Leaving the room will start a chase with the projectionist, making you have to hide in the little miracle station. Right before he reaches for the station, the ink demon comes out and they begin to fight, leading to Bendy ripping the projectionist's head off, killing him. After going through the 3 rooms and getting all the switches, you can then turn on the power to the haunted mansion. Once inside, you can hop on a cart and Alice will begin talking to you. But right before the end of the ride, a Frankenstein Boris grabs us and begins a boss fight. In this fight, we have to take globs of ink from Boris and put them in one of those mini ink machines to make a pipe. And when you hit Boris for the 3rd time, he will die, putting him out of his misery. Following Boris's death, evil Alice will run at you, only to be stabbed in the back by another Alice and another Boris, where the chapter ends. And that was chapter 4. It was probably my second favorite chapter out of all the chapters. I think Bendyland is a good and interesting setting for a chapter. The boss fights are actually pretty fun because they're relatively short, and Boris, the one person that's been nice to you throughout the entire game, getting turned into a Frankenstein's monster is still pretty upsetting. So I'm going to give it 7 out of 10 Tole Tole with eyelashes on. Now that we've completed chapter 4, we have one more chapter, chapter 5. Chapter 5 begins with Henry waking in Alice and Tom's hideout. They don't trust outsiders, so you're locked up in a jail cell. Tom specifically doesn't trust you, while Alice is actually pretty kind to you. This is where I should probably mention that Tom isn't Boris, he's Thomas Connor, the gent employee, while Alice is Allison Pendle, the person that Joey hired and fired Susie over. During one of Alice's and Henry's conversations, she will give you the seeing eye tool so that you can see secret writings on the walls. During an attack from the ink demon, Tom and Allison leave Henry to die, but using the seeing eye tool we can pull a secret switch to open up a toilet so that we can get a pipe inside and break the boards in the cell. After leaving the hideout, we reach a dock with a boat. During the ride, your boat will get stuck because the propellers get covered in ink. Here we are also shown a giant inky hand that will chase us if we stop the boat. After heading through the river, you will come across a small, cobbled-together town. In the middle, there's a house all boarded up, and when you get too close, Sammy Lawrence will come out swinging his axe. After a while of fighting, you can hit his mask off, and when you get too close to him, he will grab you and get ready to kill Henry. But right before Sammy kills Henry, Tom comes back and hits Sammy in the head with his axe. Allison explains that Sammy was holding back all the lost ones and searchers, and now we have to fight hordes of them now that he's dead. I know I usually wait to give my opinions till the end of a segment, however, this part really sucks. I have complained about the slow and clunky combat, so imagine doing it for 10 minutes. I mean, it really feels like padding and feels really unnecessary. After the fight, Allison says that we should lead the way, and almost immediately, Henry falls again. Henry lands in the administration office. This is where all the higher-ups works, and Joey's office is here too. Henry needs to get into the archive, but the hallway there is flooded, so we have to make pipes with one of the mini ink machines to drain it. Right next, where we need to put the pipes, there's a gent office with an audio log from Thomas Connor. In this audio log, Thomas talks about how the ink machine was made to make life-size cartoons, and that their first experiment was a failure, most likely being the ink demon. Now, the only problem with getting the ink to use to make the pipes is that the Butcher Gang is guarding the hallways, so it's hard to get to it. Also, a lot of the audio logs in the upcoming section are optional, so I'll be talking about all of them right now just to get them out of the way. In the first audio log, Wally Franks talks about how he found a chocolate cake while cleaning and that he ate it. An audio log from Joey Drew discusses rumors around the administration office that the studio is going bankrupt and says that they should trust in him because everything's fine. In another audio log, Joey is talking to Thomas Connor about how their first experiment was an abomination and how he wants it locked up, worried that the public would catch wind. The final audio log is Joey talking to Susie, saying that if she really wanted to be Alice, then he'll need her help in an experiment. After making the pipes and draining the hallway, you can go to the vault. Inside, there is a radio that plays a fan song called Lonely Angel by Lauren Schneider. In the vault, you meet up with Allison and Tom, where they say that they'll take you to the ink machine to kill the ink demon. Across the door is a small replication of Chapter 1. Here, we have to walk through a hallway with the ink demon close by. We then make it to the ink machine, which is much larger than the first. Here, Allison and Tom say that they can't go with you because they're made of ink, and going into the ink that surrounds the machine would be like dropping water in the ocean. In the middle of the ink machine is a throne room with Bendy cartoons playing on the TVs. On the throne, an audio log directed to Henry from Joey is sitting there. Joey talks about how they created life, and that once the tickets stopped selling, that the only thing was left was the monsters that they had created. Joey then says that there's only one way to stop Bendy, and it's by playing the film reel called The End. Once you pick up the reel, the ink demon begins to transforming into a creature that doesn't even resemble Bendy anymore. Then, the ink demon will hit Henry, sending him flying through the wall. In the next section, the ink demon will rush down the hall, killing you if you are in his path. You have to pull 5 switches and unlock 5 doors, leading to a room with 4 valves. Here, Bendy will charge at you, and you have to lead him into hitting the valves, breaking them. Doing this gives Henry just enough time to put in the reel. End cards for Bendy cartoons begin to play on the TV, and the ink demon evaporates as the screen turns white. We fade back into an apartment that is in color. Bendy merchandise lays on the shelves, and cartoon drawings lay on the desk. Letters on the bulletin board are from characters that we've heard throughout the game through audio logs. Heading in the next room, you begin to talk with Joey. Joey talks about how Henry always pushed him in the right direction, and says Henry should have pushed a little harder. Joey says Henry should check out the old studio, and heading into the door beside him, the intro to Chapter 1 plays, and the credits roll. And that's the final chapter for Bendy and the Ink Machine. And what do I think about Chapter 5? Well, I think Chapter 5 isn't great. I mentioned it before, but the fight with the Lost Ones goes on for way too long and isn't fun because the combat in this game is not good at all. The part in the administration office where you have to walk, grab ink, and make 3 pipes and have to walk back every single time is just padding and isn't fun. This is where I'm going to talk about the ending and the problem that I have with the ending. At the end of the game introduces the idea of a cycle, the game being in an infinite time loop that Henry does the same actions over and over again. My problem with this is that it feels rushed and it's towards the end. Feels like they didn't know how to end the game, so it feels incredibly rushed and kind of forced. However, some good stuff does happen. More information about Joey Drew is always a good thing, and Sammy coming back is pretty fun. So I'm going to give Chapter 5 2 Tole Toles out of 10. So let me close out the video by giving my final thoughts and a little outro to this game that I really care about. When I started this video over a month ago, I had one question for myself, and that was Bendy and the Ink Machine really that good? And I think I have the answer to it, and I think it's a yes. The art style of this game is incredibly unique, especially for a horror game. Although the story of a co-worker going back to a place that has been long abandoned that now has monsters in it is kind of overused now, it's unique for the time. And although the game has a lot of gameplay problems, I still really enjoy it. So yeah, that's everything that I wanted to talk about. Thank you all for watching, it really means a lot. This is a video that I've wanted to make since I want to say 2020. If you like this type of content, then subscribe. I definitely plan on continuing doing stuff like this, and if you like this video, then definitely like it too. And I guess I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!